حاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدو لمن آذاهم ومحب لمن أحبهم إنهم مني وأنا منهم فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأذهب عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. صلى على. وقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان السماوات إني ما خلقت السماء مبنية ولا أرض مذهية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محباتها ولا الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء؟ فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة وبعد الرسالة هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها. اللهم صل على. وقال جبريل يا ربي أتأذن لي أن أهبط إلى الأرض ليكون معهم سادسا؟ فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط الأمين جبريل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله ألا لي الأعلى يكرهك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت السماء مبنية ولا أرضا مذهية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمس مضية ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحباتكم وقد أذن لي أن أدخل معكم فهل تأذن لي يا رسول الله؟ فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء. فقال لي بأن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. فقال علي لأبي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لجن سنة هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة النجية ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محفل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومهبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم الرحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي إذا والله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال النبي ثانيا يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واصطفاني بالرسالة النجية ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محفل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا وموابينا وفيهم محموم إلا وفرج الله غما ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غما ولا طالب حاجة إلا وقضى الله حاجته. وقال علي إذا والله فزنا وسودنا وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسودوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى.
पर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सलवात। जनाब ज़ैनब की शान में 4 मिसरे। दर्दो अलम का मरकज़े एहसास बन गई। दर्दो अलम का मरकज़े एहसास آس بن گئی، بے آس قافلے کے لیے آس بن گئی، دن ڈھل گیا تو شام میں غریباں کے ساتھ ہی، دن ڈھل گیا تو شام میں غریباں کے ساتھ ہی، بیٹی علی کی حضرت عباس بن گئی، درد و الم کا مرکز صلوات۔
اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد۔
مرثیے کے چند بند فاتحہ۔ جب کربلا میں عطرت اطہار لٹ گئی، جب کربلا میں عطرت اطہار لٹ گئی، یعنی سبال احمد مختار لٹ گئی، اور بارگاہ حیدر کرار لٹ گئی، ساری حسین پیاس کی سرکار لٹ گئی، بیداد لشکر عمر نابکار سے سادات نکل خیمے سے، زہرا مزار سے، مقتل کے سامنے حرم آقا کے گر پڑ، اور پہلوؤں میں بچے بھی آ کے گر پڑے، ایک جاس تار خاک پہ زہرا کے گر پڑ، عابد وفور ذوف سے تھرا کے گر پڑ، عابد وفور ذوف سے تھرا کے گر پڑ، آیا نہ کوئی غش سے اٹھانے کے واسطے، زنجیر لایا شمر پنہانے کے واسطے، عابد نے غش میں نام جو زنجیر کا سنا، ناطاقتی میں درد سے پھر چشم وا کیا، زنجیر و طوق دیکھ کے بیمار نے کہا، کیوں منصفوں یہی ہے میرے درد کی دوا، بیمار و ناتوا ہوں میں اور تشنا کام ہوں، لوگوں امام زادہ ہوں، خود بھی امام ہوں، لوگوں امام زادہ ہوں، خود بھی امام، پنہاتے ہیں جو بیڑیاں میری خطا ہے کیا، ہاں بابا قتل ہو گئے میں زندہ رہ گیا، سمجھا میں ہتھ کڑی کے پنہانے کا مدعا، عباس کی طرح نہ کٹے ہاتھ کیوں بھلا، اصغر کی طرح حلق نہ زخمی ہوا میرا، حریص مان و طوق کے قابل گلا میرا، حریص مان و طوق کے قابل گلا میرا، جب کربلا میں عطرتے صلوات
مومنین سے گزارش ہے کہ جو لوگ پیچھے ہیں وہ پلیز آگے آ جائیں تاکہ تھوڑا سا مجلس کا ماحول بن جائے. علی سینٹر از ویلکم ٹو مولانا شیخ Mohammad Abbas Panju here for 9 speeches, and will be start from today to August 17th, and inshallah whenever Ali Center needed Sheikh Mohammad Abbas Panju, he will be here in future. So now I will request Maulana, please come on member and address to the Mu'mineen.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله بارئ الخلائق الأجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما ولي الله الحجة ابن الحسن صاحب الأمر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم وعلى غاصبي حقوقهم وعلى منكري فضائلهم من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. آمين رب العالمين. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويباب نجاة الأمة. يا غريب الغرباء، يا مظلوم كربلاء، السلام على من جعل الله الشفاء في تربته، السلام على من الإجابة تحت قبته، السلام على ساكن كربلاء. فيا ليتنا ثم يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي، يا سادتي، فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، قال الإمام روحي له الفداء مخاطبا لجده سيد الشهداء في زيارة عاشوراء: اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله، اللهم لعنهم جميعا. صدق الإمام وآمنا به. زينوا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى محمد. أحبائي, you find that Karbala, the battle of Karbala and the day of Ashura, was this grand eternal battle between Haqq and Batil, where on one hand you have Maulana Sayyid al-Shuhada Ruhi Lahul Fida, together with his companions that represent Haqq, represent Deen, represent humanity in its entirety. Rather, you have Sayyid al-Shuhada representing the message of 124,000 Anbiya. It was not only Islam that Sayyid al-Shuhada was representing. Rather, the deen beginning from Adam until Khatam, which is why we have in Ziyarat al-Waritha, Assalamu alayka ya waritha Adama safwatullah, Assalamu alayka ya waritha Nuhin Nabiyullah, until you come to Rasulullah. For Sayyid al-Shuhada on the day of Ashura is representing the message of monotheism from the beginning of time. And on the other hand, you have the army of Yazid al-La'in. This army that represents everything that is vice, evil. Rather, this army of Yazid in itself, al-La'in, is the representation of the army of Shaitan in its entirety. For you have the battle of Haqq, you have the army of Haqq, and you have the army of Batil. The lines are absolutely clear. This is one. Number two, you find that those people who are in the army of Yazid al-La'in, there wasn't a single crime, a single atrocity except that they committed it. And it is important for us to ask this army of Umar ibn Sa'ad la'anatullah alayh, how did these people who are in the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad get to this level? Into Matamis, if you pay attention and you contemplate what happened on the day of Ashura, what type of people were these who were in the army of Yazid, that they didn't have a conscience, they didn't have a dhamir. Even dhulm has a limit. But these people on the day of Ashura, they didn't have any limit whatsoever. How is it that a person who does this much dhulm, 3 days from the 7th of Muharram till the 10th of Muharram, they have stopped the camp of Imam al-Hussein from water. 3 days the children were crying al-atash, al-atash. And these people were listening, but it didn't make an impact on them. How? Today, even if you look at some of these kafirs that are there, these people who do dhulm, some of them, even till today, they have limits. If a child was to cry, they would say, no, we didn't accept dhulm to happen on a child. It's those people in Karbala, how low was their base? How low was their dhamir, such that the cry of the children didn't have an impact on them? What did they do in their life such that they reached this sort of a level? Aslan, what type of heart? Not only Hormala, la'natullah alayh, but in addition to Hormala, the people that were there in the army of Yazid, in all their numbers, they saw Hormala shoot the arrow towards Ali Asghar. What type of heart a person must have to attack an infant like this? Where was the dhamir? Ahibai, the Majlis for tonight is for us to ask ourselves, these people that fought against Imam al-Hussein, that waged war against Imam al-Hussein for all the dhulm that they did, for all the atrocities that they committed, how is it that they were able to perform these acts and not have a conscience within them, not have any remorse? What did a person do in their life until they got to this stage? Until they got to this stage that they were willing to shed the blood of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And from here, we want to understand what was the psychology of the army, or the psychology of the people within the army of Yazid. We understand what characters they had, what behaviors led them to waging the war against the Imam Zaman of their time. And therefore, the reason behind this and the goal behind the Majlis is twofold. Number one, we ourselves, we purify our hearts and our souls and our behaviors from the same traits and the same behaviors of those who are within the army of Yazid. This is one. And number two, when we do tabarra of ma'rifah. So when you understand why you are doing tabarra, Allahumma al-anil isabata allati jahadat al-Husayn, Ziyarat Ashura bain al-Qawsayn, between brackets, is a madrasa of ma'rifah. You know, Ziyarat Ashura, it is narrated to us by the Ma'soom Imam. But the asl and the origin of Ziyarat Ashura is that it is a hadith al-Qudsi. It emanates from Allah Azza wa Jal. It is wahi from Allah. If you go back to Ziyarat Ashura, inni atakarrabu, I seek proximity, I gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing tabarra. This is important because you find that the generation and the age in which we live, there is a great attack on the institution of tabarra. And it is important for us to understand what type of people were in the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad and Yazid. And from here you're able to understand why we do tabarra and what tabarra represents. All of this with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Ya Ali. From the characteristics and the traits of the army of Yazid al-La'in. Number one, what pushed them to behave in such a manner that they had absolutely no remorse when it came to killing Imam al-Hussein in the worst way? Number one, hubbud dunya. Hubbud dunya, this excessive obsession when it comes to possessing the wealth of this dunya. They were so obsessed with possessing wealth. This obsession in turn made them blind in that they couldn't distinguish between haq or batil anymore. This burning desire and greed within them to possess as much as they can blinded them. And you find two examples. I've picked two examples from the Maqtal that illustrate this fact very clearly. You find Umar ibn Sa'ad al-La'in. He himself says, it is recorded by Sheikh Ja'far al-Tustari rahmatullah alayh, the poem of Umar ibn Sa'ad, and I paraphrase the words of Umar ibn Sa'ad. Laylat Ashura, on the night of Ashura, he himself says, I know that killing Hussein ibn Ali is wrong. And I know by killing Hussein ibn Ali that I will gain eternal damnation. Meaning what? Umar ibn Sa'ad knew that by killing Imam al-Hussein, he will gain Jahannam and the la'na of Allah until Yawmul Qiyamah. It's not that he didn't know. He knew. But what did he say? But government and leadership over the land of Ray is my ultimate desire. Because Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad had promised Umar ibn Sa'ad that if you are to kill Imam al-Hussein and you are to command the army that kills Imam al-Hussein, we shall make you governor over the land of Ray. Ray is the area of present-day Tehran and northern Tehran onwards. Umar ibn Sa'ad was fueled by hubb dunya. This is one. Number two, you look at the example of these la'ins when it came to Sham-e Ghariban. Within the Maqtal it is narrated, Sham-e Ghariban, one of the enemies from the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, when the Khaymaga were lit on fire, or as they were lighting the Khaymaga on fire, the Maqtal says that the women and the children ran out of the Khaymaga. And as they ran out of the Khaymaga, the people from the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad began to steal and loot from the women and the children. Bakhtal says, one of these lions, he caught one of the daughters of the Imam, and he began to steal her earrings. And in another hadith or in another riwayah, with another narration inside of the Maqtal, he began to steal the anklet of this young girl. And he was crying. So she said to him, Ajib, you are stealing from the daughters of Risala and you are crying. What did the man say? He said, if I don't steal from you, somebody else is going to steal. This burning desire to gain the wealth and to gain this dunya, and the wealth of this dunya blinds a person from haqq and batil. Then they don't see whether they are doing dhulm or they are not doing dhulm. In today's day and age, they will very cleverly term greed as ambition. But as Shias of Ali Muhammad, as the lovers of Imam al-Hussein, as Matamis, as Azadaris, it is important for us to distinguish in our daily life what is ambition and what is greed. And it is only the teachings of the Imams of Ali Muhammad that can separate and that can help us recognize this. Hubb ad-dunya, Amirul Mu'mineen says, yu'mi. Hubb ad-dunya makes a person blind. And similarly, you find that this hubb ad-dunya and this obsession to possess as much wealth without any regards for halal or haram continues till today. You can see even when it comes to organized institutions and corporations and this and that, intum ba'ad, you know more than myself. You look at how many organizations thrive and build wealth and amass wealth on war and bloodshed, be it within arms trade or otherwise. You look at the concept of blood diamonds. People enrich themselves even at the expense of other people's lives. This is hubb ad-dunya. Number one. Number two, these were people. How did the person like Shimr become Shimr? How did the Khuli become Khuli? Right? Imam is telling us this is how these people become, and we have to be careful. Reason number two, or the second aspect, is that their flesh and bones were made from that food that was haram. I'll explain to you. See, Yom Ashura, on the day of Ashura, after Salatul Fajr, when Imam al-Hussein, we have, as per number of narrators within the Maqtal, that it was Imam Ali Akbar alayhi salam who gave the adhan on Yom Ashura. And when he did this, Imam al-Hussein led the Salatul Fajr. Behind him the companions were reciting the Salat. After they finished Salatul Fajr, Imam al-Hussein gave a khutbah to his companions. They then lined up in a formation where the center flank of the army was divided into three ranks. You had the center flank that was made up of the Bani Hashim, and in the middle of the Bani Hashim was the flag bearer, Maulana Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas Kamar Bani Hashim Ruhi Lahul Fida. And then you had the right wing that was commanded by Zuhair ibn al-Kain, and you had the left wing that was commanded by Habib ibn Madahir. And they came from the Khaymaga towards the middle of the Maidan. When they stood in the middle of the Maidan, the jihad and the war didn't begin straight away. Similarly, from the other side, you had Umar ibn Sa'ad al-La'in march with his army forward. And you had Amr ibn Hajjaj, who was posted with 4,000 horsemen next to the Furat. They were the archers. Imam al-Hussein came in the middle of the battlefield after Salatul Fajr. Sayyid al-Shuhada gave 2 khutbahs. And in between these 2 khutbahs, 2 of his companions also gave khutbahs. Burayr gave a khutbah, and Zuhair ibn al-Qayn also delivered a khutbah. It is after Imam al-Husayn's second khutbah that Hur ibn Yazid then changed, Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, then changed sides from the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad to the camp of Imam al-Husayn. But a great number of these people, when Imam al-Husayn delivered the khutbah and 2 other companions delivered their khutbahs as well, do you know that Sayyid al-Shuhada performed 2 miracles on the day of Ashura? During this time, there were 2 miracles that were performed, where one of them, Imam al-Husayn did dua on him that may you burn in the fire of the dunya before the fire of the akhirah. And this person fell into the khandak that was dug by the army of Imam al-Husayn the night before. They dug a khandak behind the khaymaga. He fell right into the fire in front of them. People, over 30,000 of them from the army of Yazid have seen the dua of Imam al-Husayn being accepted. Mu'jiza happened in front of them, and still they were not affected by this. Still they were indifferent to the dhulm that they were committing. How is it that a person becomes indifferent to guidance? How is it that a person is not moved and is not affected by miracles happening in front of him? He's not affected by the words of the Imam. How? They became the manifestation of this verse of the Holy Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the way we read in Surah Al-Yasin. Sawa'un alayhim a'andartahum am lam tundirhum la yu'minun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we recite this in Surah Al-Yasin, whether you guide them or you don't guide them, it doesn't make a difference, they will never believe. Ajib. How does a person get to this stage? It is scary. We have to think about this. Person goes to Karbala, person sees the dhari of Imam al-Husayn, person sees the qubba of Imam al-Husayn. Baba, person smells the turba of Karbala. But still it doesn't make a difference in his life. Person comes for Azadari, still doesn't make a difference to his life. How does a person get to this stage? The athar is the same. When Imam al-Husayn performed these miracles and these mu'jizat, and he saw still there is no impact on the army, still they are insistent that they want to wage war against him. Do you know what Imam al-Husayn said to them? These words of mine, this khitab of mine has no impact on you. Why? لَقَدْ مُلِئَتْ بُطُونَكُمْ بِالْحَرَامِ. Your stomachs have been filled with food that is haram. Consuming food that is haram is the first ingredient and the first recipe to make a person into a nasibi, into an enemy of Ali Muhammad. And this goes and applies upon everybody, regardless. It could be an alim who is wearing the libas of an alim, but if this same person who eats the food of haram, his libas could be the libas of an alim, but inside he's an enemy from the enemies of Ali Muhammad. But this applies to everybody. There is no exception. That's why I use the example of an alim. Haram food, ahibba'i, consuming haram food, when we want to understand the words of Sayyid al-Shuhada, can be divided into 2. The first type, and under the first type there is a number of categories under fiqh. I will just touch a few to give you an idea and an example. When the Imam says لَقَدْ مُلِئَتْ بُطُونَكُمْ بِالْحَرَامِ, that your stomachs have been filled with food that is haram. Haram food, number 1, is that income that is earned through a profession which is haram to begin with. There are certain professions, it is haram. It is certain livelihoods and certain avenues of income. Aslan, they are haram to engage. If you go back to the riwayat of Ali Muhammad and the fiqh of Ali Muhammad, certain professions, for example, to sell chessboards. We have within our hadith from our sixth Imam, every time you see a chessboard, send la'na on Yazid. Why? We have, according to many hadith and many reasons, one of these reasons is that, do you know, one of the favorite pastime games of Yazid, la'natullah alayhi, was chess. He used to play chess with his advisor called Sirjon. We have ulama, older ulama in the Hawza that used to say Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad was also a person who spent a lot of time playing chess. When the blessed head of Sayyid al-Shuhada was brought to Sham and the women of Ali Muhammad were made to enter into the darbar, Yazid was seated on a throne. On one hand he had a glass of wine, and on the other hand there was a chessboard. When the women were brought into Sham, this is what Yazid was indulged in. Earning money or selling chessboards. I could be having a store or a shop, or now the younger people, the shabab, everyone buys, sells on Amazon, eBay. I got to be careful what I buy and what I sell. Selling these games or these board games of what are considered to be tools of gambling and chessboards is unacceptable. The risk that I earn from there is a risk that is haram. Professions, there are a number of professions. For example, I cannot sell a symbol of any other faith. I cannot today go and say, because the fashion trend is for the cross, that the cross on a silver chain sells really good and there's a lot of demand and there's a lot of margin in this. I can't go start selling a cross, because in one way or the other I am promoting a story for the crucifixion of Christ that actually didn't happen. I'm promoting a madhab that is batil. So I have to be careful. And it is important that Amirul Mu'mineen Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala, says, At-tajiru fajirun hatta an yatafaqqah. Tajir, a businessman and a trader, is a fasik, deviant, until and unless he learns the ahkam of the business or the trade that he is involved in. So the first aspect of trade that is haram or rizq haram is when a person earns a livelihood from a trade or profession or selling those objects aslan that are haram to begin with. This is number one. Number two, it could be that the profession actually is halal. The profession is mubah. The term is not halal, mubah. The profession is acceptable. However, there are certain branches or secondary issues within the profession that can make my livelihood haram. So for example, practicing medicine as a doctor, as a GP, in any capacity, according to the fiqh, is mubah, as a profession is mubah. Sometimes, depending on the situation and the circumstances and the environment in which we live, this mubah can change to mustahab, and sometimes from mustahab it can even become wajib kifai, to be a doctor, for example. And there are conditions that are mentioned within the fiqh and ahkam. But for example, a person is a doctor, GP. Today, me as a doctor, I cannot start charging money to perform abortions. Working in a legal system or working within the legal system of the country in which we live is important. And it is important for a person to abide by it, but it is important for a person who is in this profession to start thinking that if my rizq or my livelihood is going to be based on the fact that I'm advising people to perform abortions and performing the abortions and taking money for that, this is a risk that is haram. Does Amirul Mu'mineen or Imam as-Sadiq accept the stance of abortion within our deen or no? So a person who is in this profession has to think, now living in the West, how do I balance between my income and between refraining or saying no when it comes to abortion? He has to think cleverly how he needs to manage, or she needs to manage this, because Islam has clear guidelines when it comes to abortion. So the profession could be halal or could be mubah, but there are secondary issues that make it haram. Coming under this also comes the issue of marketing. I could be in a trade of buying and selling, and I could be selling, for example, Android phones or Apple phones. And now we also have that I can come in and I bring a battery from China, bring a counterfeit battery from China and put a sticker inside of it of Apple and start selling it at an original price. This sort of trade or this sort of marketing is known as a ghish, to deceive. Amirul Mu'mineen, who is Nafsul Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajah, used to say the person who deceives in trade is not from us. Shayun ajib. How a person controls his nafs when it comes to things like these. First thing is to have enough yaqeen that rizq comes from Allah and from Ahlul Bayt. And there is one thing for sure. A person who comes to the Farsh Azah and sheds a tear for Imam al-Hussein, Imam al-Hussein will make sure he never goes hungry or homeless. Have yaqeen in this. Have yaqeen in this. For we come back to the topic in regards to the psychology of the army of Yazid and these factors or these behaviors or these traits that pushed them to perform the most heinous and the most atrocious crimes ever seen in human history. Number one, hubbud dunya. Number two, eating food that is haram. Now, from eating food that is haram, one section has to do with trade and profession. The second section, ahibai, is that you may be earning rizq that is halal, but the actual food that you consume is not halal, meaning that eating food that meets the requirement of dhabiha. And in this day and age, it is absolutely important. And I say this because into Matamis, you have love for Amirul Mu'mineen and Imam al-Hussein. Haram if this love of Imam al-Hussein disappears from our hearts because of one piece of haram food. Person has to use due diligence. This butcher that I'm buying my meat from, this supermarket that I'm buying my meat from, it doesn't mean that person goes to Walmart or person goes to Costco and because he sees in the frozen section they've written halal in Arabic and yalla it has become halal. La, half these people, their certificates are valid certificates, not valid certificates. Every other day, I don't know how the situation is in Houston over here, but in London, in the UK, every other day scams are happening. Before, I don't know how many months or years it was, they were selling beef curry at an absolutely cheap price. Everybody said, mashallah, beef curry like this, halal, so cheap. People were eating beef 3 times, 4 times, or lamb, sorry. They were eating lamb curry 3-4 times a week. After 6 months, they went and they did an investigation how the lamb can be so cheap in the market. They found they're selling mu'mineen donkey meat. Whether I know it was halal or not, whether I had trust or I didn't have trust. Baba, you consume the meat, whether you like it or you don't like it. The athar and the effect of consuming that haram meat is going to show either in your behavior, either in your azadari, or either in your salat and your ruhaniyat. One of them, 100%. 100%, especially when it comes to azadari and ibadat. If you want to see the effect of haram food, you will see that the impact of haram food is reflected in ibadat or azadari. Straight away, the first 2 things to get impacted are these 2 institutions. A person eats haram food, his likeliness to go towards salat decreases. A person consistently consumes haram food, his likeliness towards azadari also decreases. It's a bala, and it becomes our responsibility as much as is possible that we research these halal companies and people who claim they're selling halal food, that we do our due diligence, just like stock market. Or whenever you're investing or you're putting your money in a bank, 50 times we think these banks are legitimate banks, these are good stocks to buy, these are safe places to put our money. The same thing when it comes to what we put inside our mouth. 50 times I have to think and see, this food is halal or not halal, traceable. Number 3, people that made them behaviors and attitudes that led them to perform the most heinous crimes that history has seen. Number 3, their hatred for Amirul Mu'mineen. The army of Umar ibn Sa'ad and Yazid was fueled with their hatred for Sayyid al-Shuhada. This hate that they had for Amirul Mu'mineen blinded them from not only distinguishing between haqq and batil, but their hatred of Amirul Mu'mineen pushed them to such a level that the zulm that they committed had no boundaries whatsoever. The hatred of Amirul Mu'mineen removes a person from the parameters of insaniya and humanity into something much lower than animals. I didn't say animals, I said lower than animals. And we see this inside of the Maqtal. Do you know on the day of Ashura, when Sayyid al-Shuhada entered into the Maidan, after he buried Sayyid Ali Asghar alayhi salam, Imam al-Hussein did the first wida. He had 2 widas to the women in the Khaymaga on the day of Ashura. After the first wida, he went into the Maidan. The Maqtal, you know, there are aspects of the Maqtal that are narrated by Sunnis, not by us. The Sunnis, within the Sunni historians, if you look at, for example, At-Tabari, in his Tariq, he says that when Imam al-Hussein went into the Maidan, فَقَاتَلَهُمْ قِتَالًا شَدِيدًا. The Maqtal says that Imam al-Hussein, when he entered into the Maidan, he attacked the enemies in such a ferocious manner that they would escape from Imam al-Hussein in all directions. Within one of our maqatil, it is mentioned he attacked the center wing, dismantling them in its entirety. He then attacked the right wing. The Maqtal says, فَانْكَلَبَ مَيْمَنَتَهُمْ مَيْسَرَةً وَمَيْسَرَتَهُمُ الْمَيْمَنَةِ. He attacked the right wing fled to the left wing. And when he attacked the left wing, they fled back to the right wing. Imam al-Hujjah in Ziyarat al-Nahiya describes the jihad of Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura as being like the jihad of Amirul Mu'mineen. Imam al-Hussein, when he went into the Maidan, did a jihad that was azim. We have one of the ulama that said the jihad of Imam al-Hussein Yawm Ashura was such that the malaika couldn't continue their tasbih anymore because they were shocked with what they were seeing in the dunya. The jihad of Amir al-Mu'mineen made the malaika forget the dhikr of tasbih. Shay'un azim. And there is tafsir and there is kalam for this as well. What does it mean when you say that the malaika forgot the dhikr of Allah because they were engrossed with the jihad of Imam al-Hussein? It means that they moved from one ibadat to another ibadat. Nafas al-mahmum lana tasbih, Imam al-Sadiq says. Just for a person who is in the Majlis of Imam al-Hussein, his breathing is tasbih, Imam al-Sadiq says. It's ibadah, it's no less. For Imam al-Hussein was in this jihad that was azim. and they fled from Imam al-Hussein in every direction. They were not willing to come back and fight Imam al-Hussein. Because you think about it, these people are in war. We said the first two reasons that they are fueled by hubbud dunya, a love for wealth, that if they participate, they are getting rewarded from Yazid, they are getting more money from Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. But hubbud dunya and money has a limit. There comes a certain point if you are in the battlefield because of money and you find that your life is going to be lost in the process, then you will say, you know what, I'm going to step away. Sahil Allah, there's a limit. So Umar ibn Sa'ad saw there's a limit. His men are terrified by Imam al-Hussein. There is not a single person from a massive army willing to come in front of Sayyid al-Shuhada. So what did Umar ibn Sa'ad do? Look at the psychology. He gathered his men together and fueled them by reminding them of their hatred towards Amirul Mu'mineen. The army or the Maqtal says that Umar ibn Sa'ad gathered his men and he said, هَذَا ibn قُتَّالِ الْعَرَبِ. This is the son of that person who was the killers of the Arabs. Yani Amirul Mu'mineen. What did Umar ibn Sa'ad do? He rekindled the hatredness of Amirul Mu'mineen within the hearts of the people by reminding them that this is that same son of Ali, that Ali who killed your fathers in the previous wars of Naharwan and Jamal and Siffin. So he leveraged their hatred for Amirul Mu'mineen to fight against Sayyid al-Shuhada. And the same thing, Sayyid al-Shuhada was in the Maidan. Before he began his jihad, he said to them, why are you killing me? لِمَاذَا تُقَاتِلُونَنِي عَلَى حَقٍّ أَخَذْتُهَا أَمْ عَلَى شَرِيعَةٍ بَدَّلْتُهَا. He said, Imam al-Hussein says, after everyone has been killed, and he has buried Hazrat Ali Asghar, he says, why are you fighting me? Why are you killing me? Have I taken anybody's right? Have I performed any bid'ah? Have I changed anything in the sharia that you are killing me in this manner? The Maqtal says, فَقَالُوا لَا بَلْ نُقَاتِلُكَ بُغْضًا لِأَبِيكَ. We have nothing against you except our hatred towards you because of your father. The hatred that they had for Imam Ali alayhi salam, they removed it on Imam al-Hussein and the children of Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura. And this hatred of Amirul Mu'mineen began from Saqifa. And you'll see the letter that Umar ibn Khattab himself wrote to Muawiyah. His own, this is a confession from the enemy. This is available in the books of history for anyone to read. Umar himself says, when I kicked the door of Sayyidah Fatima, I heard her scream behind the door. I heard her cry so painfully. He himself is saying, the Zalim. I heard the pain in her cry. He says, I turned back. That cry was so painful. I turned back. He says, but then I remembered my hatred for Ali ibn Abi Talib. And I remember what he did in the battle of Badr and Uhud and Hunayn and Khaybar. And out of my hatred for Ali, I was overcome with such a rage. I turned around and with all the strength that I had in my body, I kicked the door for a second time. The hatred of Ali ibn Abi Talib, their hate for Amirul Mu'mineen is what fueled this dhulm that happened. This is number 3. Number 4. These were not people who had hatred for Amirul Mu'mineen. You know, by the way, the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, we have a number of traditions how big the army of Yazid was in Karbala. We have, for example, Ibn Shahr Ashub, who is one of our Shia scholars, who says that the army was 35,000. Allama Majlisi rahmatullah alayhi in Bihar al-Anwar says 70,000. We have ulama, the likes of Ayatollah Darbandi al-Karbala'i, who lived at the same time as Ayatollah Sheikh Murtada al-Ansari. He records from older books that the army of Yazid was actually 1.6 million people. And this is not an exaggeration. There is a manner and there is a way. There is an art on how you are able to compile all these numbers in history and come to the right point. And what we find is that Sheikh Darbandi is actually the most accurate, because he has taken into consideration the horsemen and the archers, the main army and the reserve army, and the army that also came from Sham. So all in all, together with the reserves, 1.6 million is not a small number, or is not a far-fetched or an exaggerated number. You find 1.6 million, and about 70,000 of them, those who are immediately part of the battlefield, those who are part of logistics, those who are part of all this. 1.6 million includes everybody. Those who are part of the logistics, those who are the cooks, those who set up the khaymas. This is a military operation, it's not something small. Not all of them were haters of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Not everybody who was in the army hated Amir al-Mu'mineen. Not everybody in the army of Yazid also had hubb al-dunya. Not everybody in the army of Yazid also had food that was haram. You know who these people were? They were those people who were sitting on the fence. These are people who never had the courage in their lives to take a stance between haqq and batil. And this is why, ahibba'i, being neutral sometimes is more dangerous than taking a stance. Particularly when it comes to Imam. In fact, the qadiyya of Imam al-Hussein is so azim that there is nothing like neutral when it comes to Imam al-Hussein. Haqq is so clear, batil is so clear. Aslan, there is no majal to remain neutral when it comes to Imam al-Hussein. You have to pick a side. You are either with haqq, you are either with batil. There's no in between. There's no sitting on the fence when it comes to Imam al-Hussein. And you find that majority of the army that was there, these were people who were neutral. They didn't want to take a stance in life. They didn't want to take a stance for Imam al-Hussein. They were just happy living their own small life in the city of Kufa or outside of Kufa. And the only reason that they joined the army is so that the government does not come and persecute them. And we have again in Bihar al-Anwar, Allama Majlisi narrates this one incident that happened on the day of Ashura, after Sham-e Ghariban. There was a person who was from the army of Imam al-Hussein, in the army of Yazid. That night, after they burnt the khaymaga and everything, they went to sleep, or he went to sleep. He said in his dream he saw Rasulullah. Rasulullah came and Rasulullah was crying. He said as he was crying in the dream, the enemy says, Rasulullah came to me, yani to the enemy, and he pointed at me while he was full of anger. The enemy's person who was seeing the dream, he became terrified. He said, Ya Rasulullah, why you are pointing at me? I didn't do anything today. He says, you killed my grandson today. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I promise, I even don't know what time Imam al-Hussein became shaheed. I was at the very back of the army. I didn't even come with a sword. The only reason that I came is because I didn't want my family to be persecuted by Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. I was way at the back of the army in the border of Karbala. I didn't even shoot an arrow. I didn't even bring weapons with me. I'm a neutral person. I just want to be out of trouble. You know what Imam al-Hussein said to him? Imam al-Hussein looked at him and he said, it is because of people like you that the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad became as big as it became. And it is because of people like you that the numbers of the army grew and my daughters became terrified. The riwayah mentions Imam Rasulullah put his finger on the eye of this person. He woke up the next morning, 11th of Muharram, he was blind. There is no neutral, there is nothing like neutrality when it comes to Imam al-Hussein. A person has to take a stance. And this is where us, lovers of Imam al-Hussein, Matamis, Hussainis, we have to live a life where we take a stance when it comes to Imam al-Hussein. I'm sorry if I've gone over my time in the Majlis, and inshallah we'll start with the Masa'ib, inshallah. But it is our duty to take a stance for Imam al-Hussein. Person can say, how do I take a stance for Imam al-Hussein? Is Karbala finished? 61 AH? La, la, la. Karbala and Imam al-Hussein is under attack even today. Not only by the Nawasib sometimes, but unfortunately even by our own people, they attack Imam al-Hussein and the Azadari of Imam al-Hussein. Taking a stance for Imam al-Hussein in favor of Majlis today is supporting the cause of Imam al-Hussein. Taking a stance to support Azadari in this day and age is taking a stance for Imam al-Hussein. A person who remains neutral in these issues is following in the same footsteps as those who remained neutral over there. When Imam al-Hussein said, Hal min nasirin yansuruna, today when me and you say labbaik, labbaik, how we're coming to the support of Imam al-Hussein? By ensuring that we keep the dhikr of Imam al-Hussein alive, be it through Majlis, be it through Azadari, especially Azadari. Azadari is what breeds inside the person the cultures of loyalty. The Imam needed the thing that the Imam needed the most from his companions was loyalty. Ilm is in its place, ibadat is in its place, but loyalty is at the highest order. These among many, inshallah, lessons for us to contemplate on, and perhaps we can touch on these aspects within the following nights that are also there. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Masa'ib Ahibai, Masa'ib tonight. I want to recount for you the tragedies and the sacrifice that was given by the children of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. This Mazlum Imam, when he was poisoned, the hadith says Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba was vomiting pieces of his inside with blood into a tasht. Imam al-Hussein is by his side, and yet Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba looks at him and he says, La yawm ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah. There is no day like your day, ya Aba Abdullah. Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba had 5 of his sons who became shaheed on the day of Ashura. You had Shah Qasim, you had Shah Qasim's brother Abdullah al-Akbar, Abdullah al-Asghar, and Ahmad. The 5th one who fought, his name was Hassan al-Muthanna. He fought on the day of Ashura until one of his arms was severed from the elbow. He fainted in the Maidan. They thought he was dead. The next day, after 11th of Muharram, they took him as prisoner. In the manner in which the children of Imam Hassan were shaheed, Allahu Akbar. Do you know that almost every shaheed, when they were struck by the enemies and they fell down to the ground, almost every shaheed, when they fell to the ground in their final moments, they cried out, Alayka minni salam ya Aba Abdullah. When Ali Akbar fell, he said, Alayka minni salam. When Abul Fadl al-Abbas fell, he said, Alayka minni salam. When the Shuhada fell, they said, Alayka minni salam, except Shah Qasim. Shah Qasim didn't say Alayka minni salam. The Maktal says when Shah Qasim was struck on the head of the enemy, the strike was so powerful, the strike was so painful, Qasim shouted, Ya Amma adrikni, help me, oh my uncle. The Maqtal mentions that Imam al-Hussein went charging into the Maidan like a raging lion. When the enemies saw that Imam al-Hussein is charging, they began to run in every direction. The horses from the east and the west, the Maqtal says that they trampled on the body of Qasim. Allah. Matamis, they trampled on the body of Qasim. The Maqtal says that when the dust came down from the desert, they saw Imam al-Hussein is sitting by the head of Qasim, and he's saying to him, Ya'izzu wallah ala ammik, أن تدعوه فلا يجيبك أو يجيبك فلا ينفعك. Imam al-Hussein says to Qasim, Wallah, it hurts your uncle that you called out to him but he couldn't help you, and now that he's here, Allah. If I say to you Matamis, and forgive me those of you who are Sadat, Matam is if I tell you from the children of Imam al-Hasan, it was not only Shah Qasim that was trampled upon by the enemies. There are other children of Shah Qasim that were also trampled by the horses. Allah, ya Shia. If I tell you that these are the children of Imam al-Hasan, they were not even male children. These were daughters of Imam al-Hasan. Allah. Shia Amirul Mu'minin, the Maqtal says, Shama Gariban, when the tents were burning and there was black smoke everywhere, the women and the children came running out of the khaymaga. They couldn't breathe. They couldn't see where they are running. The Maqtal says that there were two daughters of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. They came running out of the khaymaga. They couldn't see where they are running. So when they came running out, they came to the horsemen. This horseman is stealing the hijab. This one is pulling out the earrings. The daughters of Imam al-Hasan didn't know where to run, so they ran in towards the Maidan. The Maqtal says the women, the two daughters of Imam al-Mujtaba, they fell down while running, and as they fell down, they came under the hooves of the horses. The daughters of Imam Hassan were trampled to death. Allah. The Maqtal mentions, if you have the heart to listen. If you have the heart to listen, this is the final part of the Masaib. Allah. When the tents were burnt down and all the looting has happened, Sayyida Zainab and Sayyida Kulthum, they gathered all the women, they gathered all the children. Sayyida Zainab says, let us fight. They put all the women and the children together. They find a number of the children are missing. Allah, these two daughters of Imam Hassan are missing. Shah Qasim has just now become Shaheed. Farwa is in the burning khayma. She is crying. Now these two daughters are missing. So they went out to the Maidan to look for them. The Maqtal says, Sayyida Zainab found these two daughters of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba half covered in the sand with broken bones in their dead bodies. Matam Hassan, Matam Hussein.
یا حسین یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
یا حسین یا حسین
کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا
کیسا ہے حوصلہ
آؤ بتاؤ تم کو کہتی ہے کربلا آؤ بتاؤ تم کو کہتی ہے کربلا کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا
کیسا
ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ
کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ
گٹھڑی کھلی تو ماں کا تقسیم تھا جگر ٹکڑوں پہ لال کے جب اس کی پڑی نظر پروان شکر کا تب سجدہ ادا کیا آؤ بتاؤ تم کو کہتی ہے کربلا کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا
کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے حوصلہ
کیسا
ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ
گٹھڑی کھلی تو ماں کا تقسیم تھا جگر ٹکڑوں پہ لال کے جب اس کی پڑی نظر پروان شکر کا تب سجدہ ادا کیا آؤ بتاؤ تم کو کہتی ہے کربلا
کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ
کیسا ہے دل یہ
ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ
یہ ماں ہے ام لیلا اکبر جوان کی بیٹے کا ٹوٹتے دم جو دیکھتی رہی بالوں پہ خوب سر کا جس نے لگا لیا آؤ بتاؤ تم کو کہتی ہے کربلا کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا
کیسا
ہے حوصلہ
کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ
کیسا ہے
دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ
ایک آن ایک محمد جو دل کا چین تھے پالا تھا ان کو شاید عاشور کے لیے زینب نے لال دونوں دی کر دیے ندا آؤ بتاؤ تم کو کہتی ہے کربلا کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا
کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ
کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ 6 ماہ کے پسر کو کہتی رہی رباب میدان میں مسکرانا اے میرے ماہتاب اصغر گلے پہ کھاؤ جب تیر حرملا آؤ بتاؤ تم کو کہتی ہے کربلا کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ سب ماں سے افضل مادر حسین کی بیٹے کا صاف مقتل بالوں سے کر گئی گودی میں سر کٹا ہے جس کی حسین کا آؤ بتاؤ تم کو کہتی ہے کربلا کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا سب ماں سے افضل مادر حسین کی بیٹے کا صاف مقتل بالوں سے کر گئی گودی میں سر کٹا ہے جس کی حسین کا آؤ بتاؤ تم کو کہتی ہے کربلا کیسا ہے دل یہ ماں کا کیسا ہے حوصلہ محمد وآل محمد صلوات متوجہ زیارت السلام علیک یا ابا عبداللہ السلام علیک یا ابن رسول اللہ السلام علیک یا ابن امیر المؤمنین وابن سید الوسین السلام علیک یا ابن فاطمة الزہراء سیدتی نساء العالمین السلام علیک وعلی اختک زینب السلام علیک وعلی اخیک بالفضل العباس وقاسم ابن الحسن ومسلم ابن عقیل وحانی ابن عروہ وحبیب ابن مظاہر والحر الشہید الریاحی السلام علیکم یا ساداتی و موالی جمیعا ورحمت اللہ وبرکاتہ السلام علیک یا مولانا یا غریب الغرباء السلام